Hello, I'm Richard Ayres from Care England. Care England works with providers across England to support improvement, navigate regulation, and articulate the realities of delivering care in an increasingly complex system. This series is being recorded with DigiHive to create open, grounded conversation about the pressures leaders face in adult social care. The intention is not to offer quick fixes, but to surface the lived experience behind the headlines. Across these 4 conversations, we're exploring profit, which we did in our first session, and today, quality, followed by time and people in the next episodes. And we'll talk about how these pressures interact in practice. So I'm pleased to be joined again by Samir Patel. Samir, do you want to briefly introduce yourself for those who have not caught our first episode?
Thank you so much, Richard, and really looking forward to today's conversation and exploring our second pillar, which is quality.
Fantastic. Samir, I want to talk today in terms of specifically around how confident care leaders feel defending quality today. Most providers operate under constant scrutiny of inspections, reviews, complaints, questions from families and professionals, and increasingly reassurance on its own isn't enough. And when some people challenge your services, the question becomes, can you prove the quality of your care is sufficient and that you're delivering the right quality? From your perspective as an operator, how has the nature of quality kind of conversations really changed over recent years?
I think it's such an important area, Richard, and undoubtedly in the 20 years that I've had the pleasure of being in this sector, I think the scrutiny has only intensified over that period. I think the expectations upon us as providers and leaders in the sector, that level of scrutiny has only just gone one way, and rightly so, because ultimately we are looking after people, we're looking after people's loved ones, and we should hold ourselves to those highest accounts in ensuring that we are providing that quality care that we all want to. And it's interesting, I think, as technology has evolved and become more prevalent in the sector, this availability of information has just increased further. And not only that, I feel that families now who are entrusting us to look after their loved ones, their expectations have probably greatly shifted as well from where they were 15, 20 years ago. So in a way, it's a beautiful thing that the expectations has shifted, and we're expecting more of ourselves to be able to deliver that quality care we're all striving for. But at the expense of scrutiny, I think it's really difficult, and we have to be prepared as providers to not only be reliant upon kind of good intentions and that we were hoping to get the right thing or the best outcome for a resident and for their families, and actually we need to back it up with evidence. So again, technology, I think it can really help us strive in order to create that package of evidence that we can then discuss and share, not only with families and the residents themselves and GPs and stakeholders and local authorities and our regulator, but it helps us hopefully build that story about actually what is happening and what we're trying to achieve in the care we're delivering. And I think quite often as leaders in the sector, I think we know when our care is good, and we're confident in the care we're delivering, but actually are we all optimized in evidencing that and showing that really clearly to people when they ask us the questions? So I think in today's world, Richard, honestly, quality is not necessarily judged on intention anymore. It's much more around this evidence and making sure we can use the information and data we're collecting to really build that story about the care and the outstanding care that we're delivering.
Yeah, quality has intensified. You're absolutely right, and definitely evidence is the conversation we have all the time with care providers around the regulator. You need to document what you're doing. You need to have evidence. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. It really has intensified, and it's a bit of a shame that we're almost coming from that evidence basis that we have to evidence our best practice and good behaviours and the things that we do all the time. But technology is a real enabler in that respect, because we've got more data than we've ever had before, but we need to understand and interpret and use that data for good. You mentioned kind of evidence very clearly there, and what happens when quality conversations are driven mainly by opinion rather than those shared facts of evidence?
I think one of the most beautiful things about our sector is that the clue's in the title, care. That's what we're about. And sometimes that almost subjectivity can come into our thoughts and our empathy in terms of what we're trying to deliver in terms of care. So quite often, I know in our teams across our services, just sometimes carers get that gut feeling, don't they, about something doesn't feel right with somebody they're delivering care on today, or they seem a bit unsettled, or they've been calling. It just feels like they're calling a little bit more often than what they usually do. And those gut responses quite often, I think we need to lean into, and that's built up, isn't it, in terms of the relationships that our care teams get to build over time with the people, as I say, we're privileged to look after. But actually the data can then really help back that. Sometimes that gut feel, well, actually it feels a bit, I've had a few more calls from room 5 this morning. Actually, let's have a look at the call bells over the last couple of months. Has that increased from where we were a month ago in terms of the average number of times we're getting called today? So I think, again, using the data we're collecting, as you've mentioned earlier, can be a real enabler to help us kind of make sure some of those gut feelings are maybe ringing true, or maybe not, because sometimes, we're humans and we have these biases and we get things wrong. So I don't think, in terms of opinion and evidence, we're much more able now to dig deep into that. And as leaders, I suppose, what I don't want us to be is in a position of where we're defending some of the outcomes that are happening. I think we need to try and flip that script. So we're always looking, well, how can we improve? How can we get better? So using some of those gut feelings, using some of that data together to drive that improvement in quality. I think that's where we are. I don't think the problem necessarily is actually scrutiny. It's more the scrutiny, but without having any facts around that. And that links back to that evidence point you mentioned.
Yeah, I think, I like the term leaning into the gut responses, listening, the empathy side of our brains, but also linking that with the data and what story does that tell, and then kind of dig deeper into that evidence. Because, you're absolutely right. We don't want to be in that situation of defend. We want to be sort of probably more in sort of evidence, but without it being, challenging to kind of generate the evidence. But if leaders want to kind of move out of that defensive mode and mentality, what do you think needs to kind of change when we think about quality?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably as leaders, we need to just stop thinking about, is our care good? And maybe we need to start thinking about, well, actually, what signals can we identify and pick up, whether it's in conversations or data, that would actually tell us if things are starting to drift slightly. So I think being able to identify a problem before it becomes a real problem, I think as a leader is really, really powerful. And again, that takes place, as we've said, through those conversations with team members that are so important. But also then by using the data to back that up. And as I've mentioned, in my experience in the sector, I don't feel that quality is one of those things that just flips overnight and just changes, and that you go from delivering great quality care to inadequate care overnight. I think you almost get this mission creep or this drift that maybe happens over time, where we haven't been able to identify that something's not quite right within the team and the balance of the people within the team and the outcomes we're delivering. So if we can pick up some signals really early, it helps us make some of those all-important interventions and changes early, which hopefully means we don't slip too far in those outstanding outcomes we want to deliver for our residents. So I think of some examples maybe over the years that I can relate to. Response times, I mentioned that earlier on. If we notice that a resident is calling the call bell more often, is that because we're not quite delivering in the quality that we want to of the outcomes for that particular resident, whether that's at night or during the daytime? Are we seeing that engagement in activities? This is a KPI we track really closely across our care services. How many people are attending activities? How long are they attending the activity for? What's their feedback after taking part in the activity? And again, if we're looking at those numbers and we see that Scrabble last week has not been attended as highly as it was maybe a couple of months ago, well, does that kind of give us an indication that it's time for a bit of a change? And can we go back to the residents and ask them, actually, what would you like to do instead of Scrabble if you didn't enjoy that at the moment? Is there something else we can look at? So again, these conversations, using that data to drive improvements in quality is really, really important. So yeah, as I say, for me, there's this phrase we use in our services around mission creep, and we use that especially around quality. And as I say, quality for me doesn't fail overnight. It kind of drifts a bit slowly sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, spot the problem before it becomes a problem. Yeah, preempting, backed up by data. Preempt data to support it. And I do like the mission creep, because you're absolutely right. You don't just go from A to B overnight. There's a journey. You're on an incline or a decline. You don't go to outstanding overnight. You have to build and work for it. And you get some great examples there of like the call bell, engagement activities, what feedback residents give you, how long they stay in those sessions, and then establishing kind of what that tells you, linking that to other data as well. Are there any other examples you can kind of think of that really translate where evidence really changed the quality conversation for you specifically?
I think there's been loads over time, but one that really resonates with me a lot was a call that I received from one of our services where a GP practice manager had been in contact. And the simple statement was that the care home was calling the GP practice too much, and we're calling them too often. And if I'm honest, that took me aback a little bit.
Yeah.
Because your immediate reaction is to be quite defensive. Well, actually, if we're calling, it's because we need to call. And, the mindset very much was, back my team and back my staff. And it could almost come into almost a debate, couldn't it? And an argument in a way that I don't agree that we're calling with you too much. And he'll go, well, my team is saying to me that you are calling us too much. You get this back and forth. So I think this mind shift change around quality and not turning it into a confrontational, two people butting heads, but actually just trying to understand where they're coming from and the challenges they're facing, and then hopefully being able to use some of the evidence and the data and the conversations we've had internally in the service as a conversation starter. Well, this is why we feel maybe we don't feel that we've been contacting or calling your team too much. And we're very fortunate, actually, that this was a KPI that we were actually tracking in the service anyway with data in terms of telephone calls and what we were calling GP practices about. And it was very easy for us to pull that and extract that data fairly quickly and share that to the practice manager. And we were able to look at things like the frequency, how many times in a day were we calling, what was the reasonings for those calls, how long were those calls lasting. And actually, when we dug into it a bit deeper, the data actually told a pretty different story. It very much told that maybe there were other avenues for us to explore, and maybe setting up a call once a week where we could cover off a lot of little items together. Maybe as a team we were calling too often, in that the problem we were trying to solve for one of our service users didn't need an immediate reaction, but they needed a call within the next 48, 72 hours. So we learned from one another, and I think that was really, really important. And actually on the back of that now, across all of our services, it's something that's expanded. And we run a dashboard every month that we sit and review in our audit reviews around who we're calling and why we're calling. But it also helps us pull out data about, well, actually, if the call was because we had a suspected UTI, or was it because somebody's dementia journey has progressed and we need a bit more support. It's been fascinating. And I think that mind shift change of not being confrontational when these challenges arise to us, but actually being much more open and asking questions, I think, really was valuable to us as a team. And it's also resulted, as we look 5 years later on with that conversation with that particular GP practice, we have an outstanding working relationship with them. And I think hopefully they would turn around and say they're really happy with the service that we provide in the care home. And I know as a care home provider, we're really happy with the partnership we have with the GP surgery. So from maybe a challenging situation, we get to a stage where things work for all of us. And I think, maybe we can, in terms of that quality piece, it's a wonderful story, isn't it, in terms of the NHS and GP practice and care services working much closer together, which undoubtedly, we're all here to provide better outcomes for our residents and improved outcomes for them. If we can make some of these things work a bit better and understand each other's problems, undoubtedly we can move things forward and improve the quality of what we're trying to deliver.
I think that's quite an interesting example, because we've NHS and social care are butting up against each other, aren't they? And GP surgeries, they're providing a service to care homes. It's not always a great service to care homes with the enhanced health in care homes programs, the MDTs. Not every service is getting them. So I think when the GP calls and says you're calling too much, I think it will get my hackles up first of all, and I'd probably want to be really defensive. So yeah, that mind shift and not being confrontational and looking at it from another perspective can help you kind of see things differently. And great that you came out with a solution that improves quality overall, which is, really what we're trying to do with GPs. That's the whole idea of having the enhanced health in care homes program, is that we have that better relationship with GPs.
A wonderful place. Every Thursday morning now, the MDT takes place in the home. The office is booked out. All the stakeholders internally are there. All the visiting professionals that need to be there are there, and it's honestly, it's turned into a really powerful weekly meeting now. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
And the residents benefit as a result of it. That's what's important at the end of the day.
And importantly, Richard, we benefit as well as a service, because we're not having to chase our tails. We're not making 25 phone calls when it could be sorted there and there on that Thursday morning. We know where we stand. They know where we stand. And yeah, undoubtedly, the quality is improved.
Well, certainly the best solutions when all sides of the party win, then no one loses. That's great. It's a success for everyone. But I know we've talked quite a lot about kind of data telling a story, and you had to look at the data to analyse the data to understand actually maybe we are calling a bit too much. Some of these issues could have been dealt with differently. But a lot of providers worry about, when you want to improve quality, it means you're going to be drowned in data. And so how do you avoid overcomplicating the data side of things?
Yeah, I think this has been a real challenge, and actually something for us that's really evolved over time, because it can feel overwhelming initially. I think the first thing I would say is baby steps. So a small step, maybe looking at one particular area. So I could probably use the previous example we've just spoken about as a really good way to exemplify how that worked for us in the care service, in that we had a problem that was raised. We looked into the data, but then we turned that into a repeatable action that now has taken place every month, where we are pulling the data out. We are taking the time to look at those numbers, notice any of that mission creep that we mentioned earlier on, where things might be slightly changing, and addressing things early. So it's almost identifying where you think there might be a challenge, and then building that into a repeatable process that is not labour intensive for the manager or the head of care or a deputy manager or your care team managers in the service, but just becomes part and parcel of a regular monthly task that we do. I think also by not trying to overanalyze and overcomplicate things, it allows you to be a little bit more agile. So you're trying to build these systems over time. And as I say, if I go back 10 years ago, we maybe had 1 or 2 audits or KPIs we were using from data. We've actually got about 40 different metrics that we measure a month now. But again, that's taken time, and I'm not suggesting to people to go out and just try and build this overnight to get these 40 different metrics. But it is important to take that first step, and slow and steady always wins the race, as my mum always used to tell me. So I think that's really, really a good takeaway. And I think 3 areas that I would probably promote to anybody that's listening today is one I've already mentioned, the first one, which is responsiveness. How quickly and how accurately are our teams responding to when our service users require some assistance? So responsiveness is really important in terms of those call bells and responding to those pings, bings and rings that happen in services now. Experience for me and feedback, this is a huge area for me. What are people feeling when they are receiving the care? What do your service users feel about the quality of care you're delivering? What do their families feel about the quality of care you're delivering? What do the visiting professionals, the GPs, the district nurses, the delivery driver that's maybe dropping off the food to the kitchen, all their experiences about when they interact with your service is so vital. And actually the top one for me on experience is, let's not forget our team members and our people. And we'll talk about people as one of the other pillars later on in this series, but understanding what our team's experience is about the care they are entrusted to deliver, for me, is a huge area that we need to make sure we're on top of. And finally, we've mentioned this mission creep and drifting, but I'll mention it again, stability. Making sure that we are tracking and noticing any trends or dips or improvements as well, about where maybe some metrics aren't where we need them to be in terms of the outcomes. And I think one thing, again, just quickly on that, in terms of stability, all too often in care, we focus on what's not going well. I think for me, the stability also goes the other way. When we see improvements, it's so important we celebrate those successes, not only for us, but for the team, because it's really important that the team do appreciate and are fully aware of some of the amazing outcomes they're delivering and that quality of care they're delivering for the people they're looking after. So a huge thing for us is not only gathering this all important information, but cascading that and sharing that across the team. And again, as I say, it doesn't need to be huge dashboards that are being sent to everybody, because actually, when you look into it, more data doesn't necessarily equate to better care. But I think it's about picking out those important bits and being really honest and truthful with yourself about actually where to focus your attention. Because again, one of those all important pillars we'll talk about later is time. As leaders, we need to make sure we are fully focused in the right areas of our attention so that we're getting that biggest bang for our buck. If we are going to spend some time trying to help improve a particular area within our service, that it's the right area to be focusing on.
Thank you, Simi. I mean, when you said 40 KPIs a month, I think, wow, that's a lot. And you made it clear you built up to those. And that last statement, more data doesn't mean it's automatically better care. So you have to kind of build up, taking those small steps, the repeatable actions to really understand what's adding value and what's not, because that mission creep does come in all the time. How many times are you flicking on your phone and you go down a rabbit hole and you go and taking a completely different avenue and you step away from what the core is that you're trying to deal with? And not overanalyzing. And that's really great advice. And stability. I think stability is a real key thing, is that we need those stable foundations. And I love what you said about celebrating the improvement, celebrating the successes, the achievements, because we could be really tough on ourselves. I also think sometimes you need to celebrate failings as well, because actually that's how you breed a culture that is, it's okay to make mistakes as long as we all learn from them. Let's not hide them, but celebrate the failures, but also celebrate the improvements. And those data dashboards can tell some great stories. Once you kind of have that evidence, then, what stops it from just becoming more admin, something you have to do routinely on a monthly basis with those 40 KPIs, for example?
Yeah, so I think, again, because we've been doing it for a little bit of time, we've managed to build kind of a backlog of data for us, which is really amazing, if I'm honest with you. And for me, it's not about taking single days in isolation. I think it's really important that when you start building up those that backlog of data and that backlog of evidence, you can find these trends, and that is truly powerful. So I think that would be one top tip for me, is look at trends. Don't just look at single days and how a single day has been. And I think, as we related to that conversation earlier on about the GP practice, it's about asking why and not who. So that learning from mistakes and learning from failures that you've just mentioned is so important. It's not about, well, why haven't you managed to make sure that all of the actions that you've been assigned today have been completed, or who has not, I should say, fulfilled those actions that they've been requested to do that day. It's about taking the time with the team to actually understand why. What were the challenges today that meant you couldn't deliver on what we'd hoped we would be able to achieve today? And understanding that why is so important. And I think the other thing for me in terms of the evidence is actually to use the evidence in a calm way so that we can be more clear with the decisions we're making and share the reasons as to why we're making those particular decisions fairly widely across the team, because I think that, again, reinforces for the team why we're asking them to input all this data into these various systems. They need to see that actually it is leading to something and leading to meaningful change for the residents that they're caring for, and hopefully for their work days as well, right? So we can use data to analyze. It might be, well, we've always done tea at 10 o'clock. Well, actually, if the data tells us that actually by shifting that by another hour in the day, that's going to lead to less UTIs in our service, we can use that to explain the story to the team, and you would undoubtedly get way more better buy-in from everybody to change that mold of what they're used to working to. So I think good evidence can really help reduce pressure for us as care leaders and across our services. But also for me, I feel really empowered when I have some of that good evidence, because I feel that when I'm it gives me a bit more legitimacy when I'm speaking to the team and trying to get a new project off the ground. So good evidence for me really should reduce pressure, it's not about adding to more pressure, because our teams were already under enough of that.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I understand. I really identify with the point around looking at the trends, not single points of data, and using data with clarity, stepping back and questioning, is it having an impact? And yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You need to take the staff on the journey with you, because without your staff, you have nothing of a service. The staff are the backbone of our sector. Without them on the journey, you're in with problems. Thank you, Samir. That's been incredibly helpful today. I think what really stands out here is that quality leadership today is about confidence, not confidence based on how things feel, but confidence grounded in kind of what you can show and what you can evidence. And I know through this partnership with kind of DigiHive, we're really focusing on helping leaders to build that confidence in a practical, supportive way. And DigiHive's Academy kind of brings care leaders together to tackle the realities of quality, evidence and scrutiny. And then, when you use them alongside tools like the Care England Smart Care Intel solution, for example, it really helps with kind of data and insight becoming something you can understand and you can use, rather than something that creates extra pressure for our leaders and for our care workers. If quality conversations currently feel uncomfortable or reactive, then this is a really sensible place to start. So thank you again for listening today. I hope everyone else has enjoyed it as much as I have, and I look forward to seeing you on the next recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.